Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
As I was saying that we will continue with our reporting topic. We looked at an overview, some standard report, the types that we have, which is a report, writer, type and expressor. Then we looked at the type of custom reports. And these are the different types: simple, advanced matrix search, transpose, inbox, trending and composite. Now advanced being the most commonly used type, which serves about 90 to 95% of our reporting requirements. And in our demo we work on the same. Now one thing that we still need to understand is data sources, which we'll discuss today. And before we do that, let's just look at one of any report. Let's say a new hire report. Let's say if we talk about this new hire info for techno report, this has a prompt value, which is also mandatory. If I don't use this, I won't be able to get it. This is a custom report created by one of the consultants. I don't know which one, but this is how your report looks like. Now, this is just one of the basic reports, like it gives you an hire date, a couple of different ways of looking at a hire date, additional hire date, legal first name employer, ID. Now, this is a very simple report, but even to create this report, you need to understand a lot of things, for which we deep dive into the definition of this particular report. Now, did we talk about these tabs in one of these sessions where these are filters, prompts? And I don't think. No. Let's talk about these first. Every custom report will have a header called columns. This is where you will have all your columns. Every report will have this header for columns, which are the actual columns that we just saw. We looked at the original hire date, the hire date, and on and forth. The next header is for sorting. This is as simple as sorting anything. Specify how the results should be sorted. In this case, they've already defined a sorting based on the employer ID in an alphabetical descending order. The two options that we get is alphabetical descending or alphabetical ascending. Whether it's a numeric or text field, these are the two options that you get. Then comes your footer tab. Now your filter header is where you enter hard-coded values, like you're hard-coding a particular logic into a report. That the hire date should be greater Lulare 5/2020 and the active status has to be yes. But in this case, the second value, which is its active status, the user is prompting or the owner of this report is using a value which will prompt the end user. Like when we ran the report, we had that prompt. This is where it's coming from. But for this value, for the hire date, it's already hard-coded. You cannot change it. If you want to change it, you use the same value here as well. That user, the end user, can add in a different value other than this. Filter is nothing, but it puts in a logic to your report that out of all the data that you expect in a report, what is the filter data set that you need, as everything will be in the report. Let's say if I don't add in these filters the hire date or active status, then based on these columns that I have, it will run this report for everyone in the system, irrespective of their hire date, irrespective whether active or terminated. They will be there. And it will take about a lot of time to even run that report. To avoid such things, we add in filters, because without filters, if you're running a report, you're literally reporting on everyone. For any report to give you the particular data set, you need to use filters. And there's something called a sub-filter as well, which maybe once we come to a use case where we'll create our own report, we'll talk about sub-filters. The next thing is the prompts. Now, these prompts are nothing but the input that the end user should enter. Like in this case, we have the active status. We looked at active employees only default prompt and we marked it as a required value. Now, if you want to, you see the other values as here as well. If you don't want these to be prompted, then you can very well hide them using this column, do not prompt at the runtime, and you can use this as an hiding option. Output. In most cases, your custom reports are of output table. But if you're using a different type of report, which is not advanced, maybe a composite or trending, then you might pick up different chart options. Within chart options, you have top-end values and you have target lines, vertical axis, and some fun stuff. But only if you're not using advanced report. If you're using advanced report, it would most likely be in form of a table, the one we just saw. And then all these options are also relevant to different types of reports. But this is something which can be helpful. When we ran the report, we looked at something which is called as this is a test for new hire CF. And this is what we saw on the report when we ran it. If you have created a report, you want to add some context of what that report is, we can definitely use this help option. Whenever an end user runs the report, they get to see this and be more clear if this is a report that they're looking for or not. The share option now Workday allows 3 different options in sharing. The first one is don't share the report definition. By the description itself, the report. Let's say if I create a report and I use this option, don't share report definition, that means only I am the one who can use this report. And it's only accessible to me. But if someone has the report or security access, which we talked about yesterday, on day before then, I can access the report. But I cannot run it. To be able to run it, I have to go in and add myself into some of the other sharing options. But if you're not in a report writer security group, basically you're not an admin of reports, then you cannot even access the report. The first option, keep it simple, no sharing at any cost. The second option, share with all authorized users. That means anyone who has the security access. Now, that does not mean only a report writer. Some other rule-based groups as well, like HR analyst groups, do have access to some data sources and reports. They do have some reporting capabilities. If you use this option, share with all authorized users, that means anyone which has the security access can run this report, but cannot edit it. Only a report writer person can edit this. And the third option is share with specific authorized groups and users. In this case, let me just go in the edit mode for this. If I pick up this option, everything is gone. That means this report is not shared with anyone. If I pick up this option, this means that it will be shared with like. There won't be like an explicit notification or anything that will tell the user that you know this report is not shared. You can access it. No, it does not hold that. If you pick up this option, share with all authorized user. That means anyone whoever needs to run this report and has the security access can run it. The last option. Once I enable this, then we get all those input values. Share with specific authorized groups and users. Now in this authorized groups, we enter the security groups. Like we had, I think, a recruiter group here. And then, if there's someone outside the recruiter group with whom you want to share this, you can enter their names, like James Brown. Anything. Now, Adam Brooks can access this report and run it, but again cannot edit it. Likewise, recruiters can run this report, but cannot edit it. Only the edit access comes with the report, because it's not something that I created. And then in the advanced section, we go in the edit mode again. In the advanced section, the only thing that we work on with is this option enable as a web service. Now what that does is it marks a report as an online spreadsheet, or in better words, it makes this report available to be used on cloud, like sharing it on a file server. Use it as an input file for an outbound integration. When you enable a report as a web service, you make this report as a IaaS report, RAAS, which is called as report as a service. Now, enabling a report as a RAS report has many benefits. Only if you want to use it like that. Because if you enable the report as a web service, it adds in the processing time. Though if your use case is that you need to create a report and share it with any external systems, then yes, definitely enable it as a web service. But if you're creating it for your own purpose, or if you're creating it to share it with internal users in the system, then you don't need the more of web service operations, though comes in the integration topics. But as an HCM consultant, it is expected from you that you know how to enable a report as a web service. and even familiar with the topic of RAAS, which is Report as a Service. Once you enable it, Workday automatically assigns an API version and you get a namespace. And once you do that, this is what happens. Now, if I have to share this report to any external system, there are multiple ways and multiple formats. I can do it because I've enabled this report as a web service. You go to the last option, you click on the View URLs. Then you click. And these are the different formats that you can share the report with external users. You can set it in XML, XST, or DOSTL. These are Workday XML formats. These are simple Excel formats. You can share this file in a CSV format or through an RSS feed on Google Data or in JSON format. How do you show? You click on that and you get access. You're prompted for a username and password. This is something that the other user or the receiver of the report will have access to. They will have a set of username and password which they will use to log in, which obviously I don't have because you don't have any connected third-party system. But what you do is you technically copy this link and share it with them. But we won't go into the details of how that works on the third party because we don't have one. Just understand to this point that you enable a report as a web service only for that report to be used in integrations and to be shared with third-party vendors or outside Workday. That is the only purpose of enabling a report as a web service. Now coming back to our report, we looked at all these different tabs. Now, this is where all the reporting games come into picture, your filters and your prompts. But even before that, there's something called as data source. In this case, there's this data source being used for HCM reporting. There are many data sources in the system. To look at the list of that, just run a report as data source, data sources. Here's a big report that might take some time. You see, there are about 500 plus data sources that currently, and these are all worked at the level. Every data source comes with a primary object. And these are all different forms, I believe related to 1099 and all that. These are US specific. But if I talk about some of the most commonly used data sources on active data sources, I'm going to talk about some of the most commonly used data sources on active data sources. You first need to understand that receiving the report requirement can be in different shapes and forms. Someone can send you an email that this is what they need. Someone might just send you a text message like, if you're using Skype, Slack, whatever your organization uses, that this is what they need. Or someone might send a detailed description of what exactly they need. These are the columns that you need, but a lot of times you have to go back to the requester and ask for more information. And that information is very much substantial in creating your report, because if you don't know what type of data set you're pulling, then you might even start creating a report without knowing what the end result would be. You always create a report with the end result in mind. And for that, your data source selection is very important. Now, data source is nothing but visualize this as the type of output that you want. The type of data set output that you want. If you want an output of a report which should include active and terminated workers, use all active and terminated workers. If you don't want any information about terminated workers, use only the all active employees data source. If you want a report with all the benefit, set up elections in the system. Use all benefit elections. If you want to see all the benefit plans in the system, use all benefit plans. If you want to look into the existing transactions happening in the system, go with the business process transactions data source. Your decision of picking up a data source is dependent on the requirements. And there's no set of rules or regulations that tells us that this data source will work better in this case. It all comes from practice, it all comes from experience. But yes, there is some guidelines, there is some instructions which we will discuss. Now, first and foremost, we need to understand that every data source has one-on-one relation with a primary business object. That does not mean a primary business object also has the same relationship. Now, this action event can be a primary business object for different data sources. But that should not be a concern or any point of worry for us, because we really think on that lines. But let's say if we talk about business process transaction now, how to read these data sources is through their description. It accesses the action event as its primary business object and return business process transactions for all business process types. Whether you're trying to find information on the onboarding business process, time off, compensation, termination, hiring, recruiting, job requisition, this dataset data source covers all of that. Now, don't confuse a data source with any that it's a table or it's a database. No, it is the closest understanding to what our data sources is, what a database view is. If I Google database view, this I think on the better way is in a database. A view is a result set of stored query on the data, which database user can just query as they would in persistent. This is not an interesting one. Let me open this in a new tab and open these images. If you see something here, this is a good reference to understand what a data source is. The SQL view is nothing but a data source involved in how, because it's a collection of multiple tables. It's pulling information from multiple business objects and giving us the view of the type of data that we need. If you're looking for all active employees, it gives us that. If you're looking for all benefits, it will pick up the business objects related to benefits. That's why each data source has a primary business object with it. If I go into the more theory of it, our database view is a subset of a database, and it's based on a query that runs one or more database tables that runs on one or more database tables. Database views are saved in database as named queries and can be used to save frequently used complex queries. But I think this visual explains a lot. Let's see if we have any other visual. Yes, another one. These all on the left-hand side can be visualized as different objects. One of them would be a primary business object. The other one would be related business objects. And then they help to give you a view of how your data set would look like. That is exactly what data sources are. They give you a view. Again, same thing. But again, don't confuse a database or a data source with a table. It's not a table, it's like a view. It's like a virtual frame which tells you that you can pull this information from here, and you can pull your report. You can create your report. Now, when that report runs, that is when your virtual view becomes your real-time view. Data sources. Now, if I go back to this particular slide, the first and most important step is developing a custom report is to choose the data source. Let's say if I want some data about worker information. Now the next question that I have to ask myself is, do I need information of all workers, or that also includes terminated worker, or just I need to report on all active workers? Now, if that is a question that I have looking at a requirement, that means I need to back to my request and check with them. Do they also want to see terminated worker data? Or is it only active employee data that, based on that, my selection of data source would change? If I'm trying to get information about workers, I can pull their benefits information, their dependent information, their compensation, all that information. But if my requirement is from a benefits vendor that they need to see all the benefit plans in the system, then my data source selection will change. It will be more specific to a data source, which is giving me a view of all the benefits. Now understand, in this requirement, we're not talking about worker benefits. We are talking about benefits that are in the system. In that case, my data source would change, and on and forth. Choosing the data source. It's very critical when learning reports. But what Workday has done is, since most of our reports are related to worker, there's this data source, all active and terminated workers, which I think we use more than 99.5% of the time. You don't need to worry about any other data source at this moment. Just work with all active and terminated workers. What you need to do is run this report. Data sources filter on all active and terminated workers. Open that data source in a new tab. Keep this open. Don't close it. Open that in a new tab. Now, once that loads, it will tell you where all this data source is being used. Just pick out a few reports, observe them how they are designed, how the filter is added, how the prompt is added. It will give you a good head start. All read through the description. It tells you all the fields that are being pulled from different tables that are part of this view. It won't tell you which table or which business object. It will just tell you fields. Now, there are two headers here, standard reports and custom reports. Maybe pick a few standard reports and just go over the reports and see like, how is it created? What are the fields? For example, if I go with diversity of ethnicity by management level, this is built on all active and terminated worker, but this is of type matrix. Let's run it. Go to standard report, run it. Oh, this is a standard report. This is not a O, obviously it's a. We are looking at a standard report. We pick up something which is not of matrix. Let's say personal details, but since this report is not shared with us, anytime a particular report is not shared with you or you don't see like you see, this is a hyperlink, but for this it does, there's no hyperlink. What you do is copy paste it. Go to this report in personal information. I will not proxy it in as Logan. Let me expect might be a problem. These are all the different reports that we have. I'm looking for the personal details. It's here. I don't have the security. Maybe just proxy in as Logan and try to make a copy of this report. I cannot make a copy here because I don't have the access. What I'm trying to say is just navigate a couple of standard reports, run a couple of them, and just get comfortable with them. That's a big step. That's a big step towards turning reports. And likewise, once you're done with this, open up the custom reports, pick a couple of them, obviously not with the names, which are only numbered as numbers, and pick something that makes sense. Obviously not these ones. I don't know why people even create such reports. Pick up something that makes sense and just get yourself comfortable navigating around reports. Go to the multiple filters prompts, see what are the different values being used. What are the different ways filters has been added? What are the different ways prompts are being used? Get yourself comfortable as much as possible. The best part and the hardest part on learning reports is people think that you will learn report mostly by creating them. Yes, but you will learn more by looking at all the reports that you have. If I'll be honest, I still, whenever I have doubts in a report, I go into my system and look at the existing reports and see how it is designed, because there's very minute details which we get to know at a later stage. But if you just read these reports, observe them, then a lot of that becomes clear at this moment itself. As a takeaway assignment, run the data sources report filter on all active and terminated workers, open it in a new tab, and look at some of the standard reports and some of the custom reports. Make yourself comfortable navigating around the reports. That's the first step to learning reports. Then comes the next step of choosing the data source. Now, since we don't have to do that in this course, we work with all active and terminated workers. But you should know that the type of data set that you need as an output determines the type of data source. Now, every data source has a primary business object. That does not mean you cannot use another business object in a table. Because if you look at this, your view is nothing but pulling information from multiple tables and creating a view. Though you have a primary business object for every data source, you can pull information from other business objects. And if you use them in a report, they will be called as related business object. Now that related business object might be a primary business object and some other report. I have two data sources in this context. All active and terminated work with the primary worker as primary business object as worker, and then business process transaction, the primary business object as action event. Now, let's say if I'm creating a report using this as my data source, that means my worker. Business object becomes the primary. And since action event based on experience, I know it's a related business object. It has links with the worker table. I can use this object in my report using this as a data source. My action event becomes a related business object. Now, in the second case, if I'm creating a report using the data source as this, then my action event becomes my primary business object. And my worker becomes my related business object. It's not that a primary business object remains primary business object forever. If you're using it in another report where it's a different primary business object, then that becomes a related business object. But that's just a concept to learn. That's just a concept to know. In real time, there's no how to put it like, even though if you don't call them related business or primary business, it's not going to make any difference. But just to differentiate, just to understand the concept that you can use other business objects as well, other tables as well. Workday has coined this term, primary business object and related business object, which can be referenced as a primary key and a foreign key, something like that. But just as a reference, not the exact replica of that. A lot of the learning comes from just making yourself comfortable and navigating to this report, looking at different business objects. Once you're comfortable with this, the next one is this one. Business process transactions. All the transaction-related reports are created using at least most of them. And this is quite a complex data source. I won't say the data source is complex, but the requirements that use these data sources are usually a little complex because there's a lot of comparison between when that transaction was initiated, entered, etc., etc. Based on that, things change. And then they also have a lot of reports, and let me be very explicit about it. You don't need to stress out on this topic. Nobody in the interview is going to ask you that. Can you please create a report for us? No, they won't do that. There'll be more scenario-based questions. Like, if I need to create something like this, what would be a first choice of data source? Or you can very well say, my exposure has been to all active and business process transactions. But if I have to take a guess, then maybe take a guess. That's walking over. This report is important. At least you'd make yourself familiar with the data sources. Always stay in the reality. Don't over jump the reality here because Workday it's very huge. What we do in this course gives you the basics and gives you the understanding. The more things you see in the system, the more you'll be able to relate it when you will be in the actual job. But yes, at the same time, the practice is most important. The more you explore, the more you look at things. You don't need to just create things. Just look at those, understand what they're doing, make yourself comfortable. And at the time, once you get the job, you will go into the work mode. You start your career in the Workday ecosystem. You will get to learn a lot of it. But knowing that there's some data sources, what those are, there are objects, this is something related to reports. That's good starting to learn reports. Reports is big in itself. Be realistic. Don't stress yourself out in learning everything. It's humanly impossible because all of it comes from experience and it takes time. Reporting is one topic where explicitly mentioned that, don't stress yourself out because it becomes quite overwhelming. Oh, this is not making sense. That is not making sense. That's if it's not making sense. If anything is not making sense, stop what you're doing. Maybe pick up another topic and then come back to this and just observe. It will make sense eventually. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.